Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs about their approach to life, business, and everything in between.
So I was super excited. I read so much stuff like that's I don't even know what for, like to go to a cocktail party and discuss things. But I was so excited to see your name pop into my box and see that you have written this book, Reclaiming Your Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one, which is coming out. And I couldn't think of a more appropriate person to write a book like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I agree. 100%. It's been waiting to come out for a long time.
And I love the cover. It's so great. Um, I wanna talk. I mean, your career is so amazing, but at the end of the day, you're a South Bronx girl who's never left the South Bronx.
No, I did leave the South Bronx for a
Oh,
while, not just school. Yeah, I went away to college, of course, but, I definitely I lived outside of this neighborhood for as long as I possibly could, and I wasn't trying to come back here. And that's part of the reason why writing that book was actually as personal as it was, kind of like what I hope will be sort of like a guidebook and inspiration for other folks who are interested in helping to understand that they don't have to move out of their neighborhood to live in a better one. But it was also because, like, I ran away from my community, for a long time. And
and
and it
why
was
did you run? Why did you run? I mean, you're extremely brilliant. I mean, you're teaching at Princeton. I could go through a million things that you've done. I mean, you're in real estate development. You've been a public radio host. You have created MIT's first lab in South Bronx. You had a consulting firm. You've won ridiculous amounts of awards. You care about green. You care about the community. So, why did you leave? Were you not finding support for all those things, or did you think you had to leave to get them done?
No, I left because, like a lot of American low status communities, which, and we use the term low status, not because there's something wrong with the people in the community, but it's really sort of the viewpoint of the way many people from inside and outside of communities like the South Bronx, where there are low health outcomes, low educational attainment, high rates of poverty, high rates of folks, involved in the justice system. Um, there's and within those places, and they could be as diverse as inner cities, as Native American reservations, as former, all white, former Rust Belt towns that used to have a
Mhm.
lot of industry but have none now. Those places are viewed again by both inside and outside those communities as being places that are just steeped in inequality.
Yes.
Period.
It's interesting, low status, that I've never heard. I have certainly used the word in organizations that I've been involved with to try and be helpful, is, underserved.
Yes. And that's typically off the top, underserved, marginalized, and they absolutely describe the situation. But as far as the status goes, it's almost like this immovable thing. So if you're born and raised in a community like that, no matter what your color, you are essentially, unless you get out of those communities, then the status of those communities is low, period. And they're treated that way, from the nonprofit industrial complex to often our elected officials, philanthropy, even people from inside our communities. That's why we tend to measure success by how far we get away from them. And I was one of those kids. So I was reading at 3, and I went to Bronx Science, and I got into Wesleyan, and it was just like understood that I was going to grow up and get out. And that's the way it works. And so people like to think that brain drain is this thing that only happens in the developing world. It's not. It happens in American low status communities every single day.
Yes, every single day. No, I was gonna say, what you're talking about, and essentially what you're saying is that we need to do a better job of teaching people to fish, not giving them fish.
Yes, but that's not what happens
No, it isn't, and
ever.
the brain drain is happening in communities across this country,
Absolutely.
including very much those Rust Belt
Hmm.
cities that their children have gone off to college and they are never returning because there's nothing there.
Yep. Oh, I play really well in red and blue states because folks are just like, that's my hometown. I was literally just up in rural Vermont and gave a talk and people were just, and it's like super white, and people were like,
For sure.
you're talking, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about my community. And that's why I left. And so the whole so I know, like, I've struck a chord here because I also know I'm not alone, and I know that there's plenty of folks who want to recognize and actually act as though you don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one, that you don't have to measure success by how far you get away from your community, that you can reinvest not just financially, which is definitely important, but
For
also
sure.
emotionally and spiritually. And that's, that mindset that makes people feel like, wait, there's value in our communities, is one that we've got to get to. And basically, it's like 400 and some years that's telling us that that's not the case.
So, which is for sure. I mean, I even remember as a kid having these conversations and saying, "Oh, well, the people that do really well in those Black communities that are super smart and go on to college, they never come home.
Mhm.
They never come back to the community to help lift up the rest of the community."
Mm-mm. Right, right. And why should they, when they've been led to believe that there's, by the everything that society has told them, that the measure of their success is how far they get away from those places. Period.
So how do you change that narrative for this next generation of children, or young adults that are now, finding they're moving into their careers, as well as I think your timing couldn't be more right in this, let's hope, post-COVID world.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. So, I mean, I'd like to, you know, help people understand, and that there are definitely those that get it, that gentrification, which is the big G, dreaded G word that everybody hates. It doesn't happen when you start to see things like doggy daycares and cute cafes in places where you didn't see them before. It starts to happen when people see no value in those communities
Mhm.
beforehand. And we're led to believe that. And again, this is like hundreds of years of historic and systemic racism, that literally just said that the communities where we end up are of no real value until somebody else changes it, right? And of course, then you add, insult to injury with whether it's redlining and just urban disinvestment, all those things just like adds it all together. But the reclamation of it, and why it was important to call this book "Reclaiming Your Community," it was really all about that. People are involved, they recognize, one, that they are the talent that they've been waiting for. So it really is very much like like a corporate retention.
It's also the perfect storm because as we are changing as a country in regards to our demographics, all of a sudden you have a huge group of Black and brown Americans that are on our TVs, that are in companies, that are starting businesses, that are in every vertical, there where their art is becoming more applauded, their movies are becoming more applauded, and all of a sudden you have a next generation of kids saying, "Well, if they can be that, I can be that."
Mhm.
And they want to be part of their communities and are interested in giving back to their communities because they're coming it from a point of power more now than they were before because as a country, we have done a horrific job of keeping up those areas with capital.
Right.
We've literally let NYCHA, where I am involved, those buildings have just they're leaking when it rains
Yeah.
because no one has put the money
Right.
every single year it takes to keep up a building.
Right. Right. And that's like based off, and honestly, I think that comes from, just the understanding by whether, again, people inside and outside those communities, just sort of feeling that those places will always kind of be like that. And I think that, again, that is, I think, the legacy of systemic racism when it gets right down to it. And but to really think about how change some of that dynamic. I mean, first of all, it's I mean, there's the Nobel economist Richard, I make sure I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name, but I think it's Thaler.
Mhm.
He talked about nudges, and like you need little nudges, to push things. That's how people like understand climate change and all sorts of things like that. And so, but if people don't like aren't like nudged into it, they'll think that it's something horrible happening, to them. So the way that we're trying to do it is the nudges are these, are is lifestyle infrastructure. Because and for that we mean they are the cafes, they are, the doggy daycares, they're the bookstores, they're the cool places to hang out at. And we know that those are the kind of things that the talented ones in our communities tend to leave the neighborhood in order to experience. So if we want to keep people here and actually sort of giving their own community a second look and feeling and wondering how they could reinvest in it, they've got to have something that's going to keep them there. And so that's why we've really put in an emphasis on creating lifestyle infrastructure. We started a cafe called the Boogie Down Grind Cafe, specifically because we knew people were leaving the neighborhood to experience things like that. We do open mics and we'll do credit repair workshops. We'll do all sorts of things, basically just to show that this is the kind of space where you can get, not just a great cup of coffee and some good craft beer and all that good stuff, but really build community, with each other. And,
Yes.
a place where you can be inspired by others, but also be inspiring. And again, that's the kind of thing that we often feel that people in our own community is like, there's nothing here, including, people don't stay. So why the people that I want to hang out with don't stay?
Right, so why bother? So but you have
Exactly.
created a foundation there. So let's go back in your career, like, you left, right? And then you started becoming interested in environmental justice.
I did.
And
Yes.
and then as you started to return to the city, be it, you were living in a different area or whatever, but I do remember all this brouhaha around, you were the green power broker. Well,
Mhm.
to me, I read that and I knew you, but I also thought to myself, "No, she's just ahead of the curve."
Yes. Agreed.
And the neighborhood's freaking out.
Well, it wasn't just the neighbor. It was odd because what I had to learn to do, and it didn't take long, was help people, see the value of having both a personal and a financial stake in improving the environment. Like, no, people didn't talk about green or sustainability, but they knew that their health was being compromised, by the siting of many noxious facilities in this community. And what was really interesting, for me after that was when people started to get that, then it was just sort of like, well, what else? Like, what else is like, can there be something else here? And what became very, very clear was that people, and actually me in particular, I was just tired of fighting against stuff. And I wanted to fight for something, something that actually meant something, to us in our community. And that's why I started working on project-based community development rather than just advocacy. Because, so transforming a dump into a park, that's now a national award-winning park, doing green collar job training and placement systems. It was really people were focused on, we need decent jobs. And then after that, it became very, very clear to me that this was about real estate. That if we continue to concentrate
It
poverty,
always is.
always is. But I think the sort of like MO of community development in low status communities is that two things happen. Two things in terms of real estate development. One, there's just an assumption that things get gentrified and the community will be planned and built in a way that meets the needs of folks from outside the community. Or there's something that we call poverty level economic maintenance. And that is where you see more health clinics, and pharmacies, basically things that will cater to unhealthy people, but don't necessarily help support them. So you'll see lots of fast food.
Mhm.
You'll see lots of highly
Oh, yeah.
subsidized affordable housing for very poor people, concentrated numbers of homeless shelters, and all of this just simply serves to concentrate poverty. And when you concentrate poverty, all those things get worse. They get worse statistically.
Right, it's just keeping the neighborhood alive, not keeping the neighborhood healthy.
Exactly. And so for me, I was just like, so why do we keep doing that? in places like the South Bronx. And their South Bronx is all over the country. But it became really clear that I was like, this is a real estate development play. And that's when I decided I needed to be a real estate developer and started focusing on mixed income and mixed use commercial and residential development, specifically with a focus on how do you, in particular, wealth
Well,
creation, in
that's the
communities
key,
like
right?
this.
I mean, at the end of the day,
Mhm. But
that is what gets you out of that hole.
exactly. But if we're but, from where I live in Hunts Point. This is like a part of the South Bronx, and our home ownership rate in this community has gone down. It's down to less than
Oof.
7%. And almost all of the homes are bought by holding companies, by predatory speculators. And, what boggles my mind is that, if you're commit a crime or accused of committing a crime, there's a court appointed aide to support you, legal person to give you representation for people in communities like this. And like, for example, we know people from this community who were approached by real estate, who were approached by predatory speculators. They didn't have much financial acumen at all, and they sold their homes that are worth way more at the time, more than $500,000, for pretty much pennies on the dollar. And this is legal. This is legal. And how is that legal?
Oh, yeah, you go into neighborhoods, and you see these things, "We will buy your house for this, call us."
Yes, totally. I get literally just today, my husband got a call saying, "Hey, we're interested in buying your house." And we just like pull them along just to see how much what they weren't willing to do. And of course, they lowball everything. But the thing is, if you don't know, you don't know. And that's why it's so bizarre to me that, again, people can make those kind of six-figure transactions with no support from the city, for or philanthropy. And it's just sort of like, we'll just build another homeless shelter or build another health clinic or a community center. And I'm just like, that's not economic development. That's really, that is one of the most unhealthy and, I think, frankly,
I
unethical
agree.
things we can do. But it's real estate development, and I get it. And again, there's nothing illegal about it, but it should be.
For sure. There's so much that should be illegal that isn't. But it is, but, I mean, it's actually the morality, right? Doesn't it make more sense for all of us to build kick-ass communities regardless of living in them or
Right,
not, but they all function as really healthy communities? Yes, duh, that would be great. Wow, what
right.
happened to our GNP? Oh my god. So let's go back because what I think is interesting too is you have been in the public sector and the private sector. And at each job or each place where you've hung your hat, you have always been involved in advocacy. And where do you find it's easier to actually make a difference?
Oh, I'm a totally fully recovered executive director. I just no. There's I find it to be the kind of place that eats your young and that, sort of maintains the status quo and is not particularly open to innovation at all. And to be honest, I'm really happy that I'm out of it in every single way.
I appreciate that.
But I feel like that's, and that's why I left the nonprofit world. I mean, number one, it really was just like I mean, I almost ended up in the hospital for a third time, just working myself into it. And that just made, and it was just, and the thing, and I'm sure you know this as well, but, historically, women are not
No.
paid and supported in the nonprofit world as men are. They're just not. I mean, Isabella Allende did an amazing study about that, and I don't know if the numbers are still accurate, but it was just like for every dollar a woman raises, for an organization, a guy can raise 20. And I was just like, but there's more women doing this work. But again, that just speaks to, the gender bias that experience. And then you add race on that. And it was just like, I just can't
And
anymore.
wealth creation,
Hmm. Totally.
right? So, as America went through like the 4 years of Trump, which I cannot and still can't believe that we did. And then we went into,
Yeah.
a pandemic. Just talk about what happened as you were writing this and you were involved in your communities and you're looking at trying to do better for your community through your angle, which is real estate and community reach and all of the things that you're running. What happened and where are we now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yes, Trump was a nightmare. At every moment, it was just like, did that really happen? Did he just say that? And of course, I went through that with everybody else. But on some level, it wasn't. You know, this is just the work I do. And trying to create a degree of health and well-being in a space that hasn't really ever been that supportive of the kind of communities that I'm always interested in anyway. It was just kind of like, well, it's just almost just another day. And I know it sounds awful saying that, but during 2020 in particular, when people started thinking about like, oh my God, there's this thing called the wealth gap.
Yeah,
And people like me were like, "I'm glad somebody notices." Finally, we
right.
can do something
Right.
about
I
it.
mean, yeah. Or these crazy parents who are like, I don't want our kids to know really about our history. It could upset. I mean,
Oh gosh,
seriously?
yeah, it's
So,
just like
well, what's
yeah,
interesting.
well,
There's a lot
there's a
there. I
lot
mean, it's
there.
kind of frightening. So, I guess the question is, do you believe that the ugly truths regarding race, wealth creation, and community that were seriously exposed during COVID, do you think that has pushed us over a abyss or gotten the country maybe to the starting of a road that's going to be a better path for this country?
Um, I'm not so much hopeful about being on a new journey is the fact that I think there are some folks who are ready to embrace this. I mean, because believe me, I'm finding it because I've noticed that there's also like a bigger doubling down, of folks who just are afraid. Because if we really, stop and really understand like the level of entitlement programs that is hundreds of years in the making, and what that means to create the kind of advantage that white folks have in this country, and also has created the wealth gap and everything else that we're dealing with. But I think that is some pain that white people are going to have, are clearly having a
Clearly.
reaction
Yes.
and experience. So it's also just so important that those who are interested just keep stepping up and having those conversations, because it's not easy for anybody. But I feel like I'm not so sure if there is like, wholesale American, like we're gonna deal with the racial reckoning with our country.
No.
No,
No,
I
no,
don't
I
see that.
agree. I
I
mean,
just don't.
I don't think any of this is a panacea, but I do like that everyone in America, at least unless you're living under a massive freaking hole, which a lot are, is that the conversations about BIPOC or,
Mhm.
uh, Black Lives Matter or, gender fluidity, particularly among this next generation, which is evolving us as human beings, or climate change and industries that
Mhm.
are like destroying the climate, that all those things, including cryptocurrencies, which hopefully will change our banking systems, that like these are things that are the front page of the tape papers.
Right, right, right. And I feel like those are super, super important. But I do hope that I mean, literally, I pray about this, that there's like enough folks who actually see the value in recognizing that there's more opportunity out there, and that just because, but it's not taking it away from
Mhm.
those that already have it, right? There is enough to go around. There truly is. But again, the legacy of systemic racism, like, makes
Yeah.
people not appear human. And that unfortunately is the God's honest truth.
No, it is true, but I do think about your communities that are so hurting and having people come back into them that are working, to have spaces that are group spaces that people can go and work in, that does keep the people within the community, which is why I kinda love how everyone's working from home, and I always thought that's what would happen, to be honest with you, in the mid-90s when we were seeing, the explosion of the largest companies that is now Google or Amazon, that it would be where all women or all men or everybody got to work from home so they could raise their families and deal with their friends or whatever it is they were, that they'd only go into the office a couple days a week, and that would change communities. And so I do hope
Mhm.
that we're moving we have no choice. This is where we are now. Mm,
Right, right, and I feel like that's absolutely, look, the nature of work has changed, how technology is used right now, but the bottom line is, community is not just a place, it's an activity, and you do need places to do it. And that's why, Reclaiming Your Community, my book was really, sort of like, first of all, something that I literally had to do, because like my sense was that it really wasn't the easiest. No, I know it wasn't the easiest thing, but it wasn't generally the way that low status communities were expected to engage in this world. And so because yeah, my whole point is to challenge this notion that you do have to move out if you're going to live in a better neighborhood, and that there's always just has to be neighborhoods that people don't want to be in, and that they do only get better when they change. And I'm just like, no, I mean, I love the fact that between creating cafes and
I love the
or
event hall.
again, this
That's I
event
mean,
hall that we're working on, or
that's
even building a
how many
park.
square feet is it gonna
Oh,
be?
it's amazing, it's amazing. We
That's
did
fantastic.
It's about 3,600 square feet. Cass Gilbert, same architect of the Woolworth building, did designed these little rail stations up here, and I have one of them, which I'm very excited about. And we did a little sneak peek of what it could be last December 11th. And during the day, it was a pop up market or flea market. Kids call it pop up markets now. The actor Malik Yoba is now a filmmaker and a real estate developer, and he did a series called I Build New York, and I happened to be in the first episode, so they screened that. And then after that, it was like this incredible, hip hop and rock
Super
show.
awesome.
A lot of Bronx folks were just like, we were there until like 2 in the morning. I mean, it was amazing, and we haven't had that kind of those type of things in our community since I don't know when, since basically the old Hunts Point Palace, which was a vaudeville palace, and where Mambo was not created, but salsa was actually created in the South Bronx. But these were like big dance halls up here, and they've been long gone. So the fact that suddenly like all these amazing musicians and performers will soon have a place to perform.
Yes,
That this is a place where people can build, can actually, like, whether they're having weddings or parties or whatever, those are the type of things that people again want to see in their own communities, and that's why we did it,
which
because
is
it's
so
a
great.
really important thing to make it happen.
Well, I don't know who your community council leader is, but I will say, in a variety of communities across New York City, which each has its own community council person to sit on the community council, that for the first time ever, I think there's 38 women out of 56 people on that committee.
For the city council or the community board, local community boards? That is 38 women on community in the
City
really?
council, yes, and I know that because when they all ran and they all started to run and they were running through Kathy Wiles' group, they all would talk to each other. I gave a donation to all of them
Uh-huh.
to kick off their
Yeah, yeah.
campaigns because I thought it was so amazing because then they got matched, because the way we raise money for these campaigns is so for caca. But regardless, it's super cool. There was actually a great spread
Wow.
in New York Magazine and it showed all of these women, which
Yeah,
are from a
very
lot of
true.
different communities,
It's,
you know,
we get
that
it
at
together.
the end of the
So
day, it's always the
let's be
women.
realistic.
You know? Yeah, we get it together. So I have one last question for you. What surprised yourself, um, as have gone through all the things you've been involved in, you finally decided, "I'm gonna write about reclaiming the community because I am the perfect voice for this, which is what surprised yourself about the pandemic as you were, going down this journey essentially?
Well, I mean, the most surprising part, and this is actually one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was, I always thought, because there was a part of me, and I still do believe in the promise of America. You work hard, and sooner or later, somebody's going to see it. But, I
You
realized,
have to. You have to.
but, I realized as I was trying, when I basically put on, this armor and decided that I was going to try my hand at real estate development because like I knew that I could do it better than the kind of stuff that I was seeing in my community. I was astonished at the sometimes the level of vitriol that I got, as a woman, as a Black woman, just trying to make my community a better place. And and I knew, and here I am, I'm a MacArthur fellow. I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm accomplished in a lot of ways. And if I was having those type of the level of antagonism that came from like all over the place, some of it was from developers, some of it was from the city, some of it was from like a small subsection of the community. I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh. And I realized, because I've worked all over the country, I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew that if I'm feeling like this, I know somebody else needed to feel like they could do something, that they needed, some support. And that's why I wanted to write that book.
Makes total sense.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's so great catching up with you.
You too.
I love that you wrote this book.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Really. All right. Take good care.
All right. All right. Take care. All right. Bye bye.